I woke up at 6:42 on a Tuesday. I made coffee. The same coffee I make every morning. 2 scoops, no sugar. The mug with the chipped handle I keep meaning to replace. I checked my email while it brewed. Nothing unusual. Quarterly report, a scheduling conflict, a reminder that the all-hands meeting had been moved to Thursday. I showered, got dressed, put on the gray blazer, because the gray blazer always works. I took the elevator to the 14th floor and said good morning to 3 people whose names I still wasn't sure about after 8 months at the company. I sat at my desk. I opened my laptop. And then Mary Callahan walked through the glass doors at the end of the corridor. Late, like always. Sunglasses still on, coffee in one hand, her whole presence filling the room the way it always did. Like the office reorganized itself slightly, just to accommodate her. And she looked at me. Not at the room. Not past me. At me. She held my gaze for exactly 2 seconds longer than she ever had before. And everything that had been completely, unremarkably, boringly ordinary about my day stopped being ordinary. I looked back at my screen. My hands were steady. My face was composed. Professionally, I was fine. But something underneath all of that, something I had spent 6 months carefully, expertly, successfully pretending wasn't there, had just moved. I told myself it meant nothing. I was very good at telling myself things that weren't true. Let me tell you something about Mary Callahan before I tell you what happened. Most people at the company understood her as a type, the CEO type. Sharp, demanding, impossible to read. Always 3 steps ahead of whatever meeting she was in. They admired her from a distance the way you admire a very efficient machine, with a kind of respectful terror and zero desire to get too close. I understood her differently, and that was the problem. I'd been hired as her executive assistant 8 months ago, which meant I spent more time with Mary Callahan than almost anyone else in her life. I knew that she took her coffee black until 2 in the afternoon, and then switched to green tea without explaining why. I knew that she never raised her voice when she was truly angry. She got quieter instead, and the quieter she got, the more everyone in the room started breathing carefully. I knew that she kept a small framed photo on the corner of her desk that she never talked about, and that sometimes, when she thought no one was looking, she touched the edge of the frame with one finger, like she was checking that it was still there. I knew that she laughed with her whole chest when something actually surprised her, and that this happened rarely enough that the sound of it, when it came, felt like being let in on a secret. But none of that was new information. What was new, what had been quietly, insistently new for a few months, was what happened inside me when she walked into a room. Here is what I want you to understand about me. I am not a dramatic person. I am organized. I am professional. I am the woman who arrives 8 minutes early to everything, and has the backup copy of every document, and never, ever lets the personal bleed into the professional. I had built my entire career on being that woman. And then I started working for Mary Callahan. It didn't happen all at once. It was slower than that, quieter, like the way a season changes. You don't notice it day by day. And then one morning you step outside and the air is completely different and you think, when did this happen? The first time I felt something off script was about 2 months in. We'd been working late, a proposal that needed to go out before midnight. And at some point around 11, we'd both run out of words and were just sitting on opposite sides of the conference table in silence. And I looked up, and she was looking at the window, and the city lights were doing something extraordinary with the glass. And I thought, I could stay here forever. Not in the office. Not working. Here. In whatever this was. I closed my laptop and said goodnight, and went home, and didn't sleep, and told myself I was tired, and that tired people think strange thoughts, and that was all it was. That was all it was. It was fine. But then there was the afternoon she came back from a board meeting, and closed her office door, and I heard something shift in her. Not a sound exactly, but a change in the air. and without thinking I made tea and knocked and brought it in, and she looked at the mug and then at me and said quietly, "How did you know?" And I said, "I didn't. I just thought." And she said nothing else, just looked at me for a moment that lasted longer than it needed to, and then she turned back to her window. I stood there for a second too long. I left. I told myself, that's just good instincts. That's what this job is. You pay attention. You anticipate. You serve. That's professionalism. But the feeling that followed me down the hallway to my desk, warm and confused, and a little bit like falling, that was not professionalism. That was something I didn't have a professional word for. The months rolled on. I got better at managing it. I created systems, internal ones, not the kind I kept in spreadsheets. Rules. Don't linger in doorways. Don't let silences stretch. Don't notice the way she tilts her head when she's listening to something that interests her. Don't notice the way she says my name, Fabi, with that specific emphasis. Like the two syllables mean something to her. Don't notice, don't notice, don't. I was so good at not noticing. And then she made the joke about dinner. It was a Friday afternoon in March. We'd spent the better part of the week preparing for a meeting with potential investors. Long hours, a lot of coffee. The particular kind of closeness that comes from working under pressure with someone you trust. By Friday at 5, we were done. The proposal was submitted. The meeting was confirmed. We were sitting in her office going through the final checklist together. And when we hit the last item, she closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair and let out a long breath and said, "I should take you to dinner." She said it the way you say I should really clean out that closet. Easily, offhandedly, without weight. I laughed. She laughed too, and that was it. We both went home. The weekend happened. Monday came back. Except, I couldn't stop thinking about it, which was ridiculous, obviously. She hadn't meant it. It was a figure of speech, a polite nothing. People say things like that all the time. I should take you to dinner, we should grab coffee, we should catch up sometime. And nobody expects the other person to take it seriously. Nobody sends their address. So I didn't think about it. I thought about it constantly. I thought about it on Saturday morning while I was running. And then I told myself I was being absurd. And then I thought about it again. I thought about it in the grocery store, in the cereal aisle, which is possibly the least romantic location in the continental United States. I thought about it while I was trying to read a book that had nothing to do with Mary Callahan or dinner or the particular way she'd been looking at me lately. Lately. When had lately started? I put the book down. I stared at the ceiling. The thing about working closely with someone for 8 months is that you develop a calibration for them. You know their patterns. You know what their distracted looks like versus their actually listening looks like versus their trying not to react looks like. You build this internal map of a person, not because you're looking for anything, just because attention is what the job requires. And eventually the map becomes so detailed that you notice things before you can choose not to. I had noticed things. I had been noticing things for a while. The way the quality of her attention changed when I walked into a room. Not dramatically. Mary never did anything dramatically. But there was a recalibration, a slight adjustment, like a compass finding north. The way she'd started, in recent months, finding reasons to work late on the same nights I was working late. Not always, not every time, but often enough that I had started noticing the pattern and then immediately started telling myself I was misreading the pattern. The way she'd said my name, Fabi, in the middle of a sentence about budget allocations last Wednesday, and then stopped for exactly half a second before continuing, as if the name had caught in her throat. These were small things. These were things that meant nothing. These were things I was not going to act on in any way whatsoever, because I was a professional person with professional judgment and absolutely no interest in complicating my life. And then on Sunday night, at 9:47, I picked up my phone. I don't know exactly what I was thinking. Or maybe I do, and I still can't quite stand to say it. I opened the thread with her. Scrolled up past 3 months of scheduling logistics and venue confirmations and forwarding for your review, and stopped. Her message. Friday afternoon. You can still see the timestamp. 5:22 p.m. I should take you to dinner. My thumbs moved before my brain could catch up. I typed, if that wasn't just a polite nothing, I live at 847 Meridian, apartment 4B. I stared at what I had typed. I stared at it for a long time. And then, before I could think, before I could be the organized, professional, sensible person I had always prided myself on being, I pressed send. I put the phone face down on the coffee table. I sat very still. 5 seconds. 10. 30. The phone buzzed. I flipped it over. Her message. I'll be there at 7. Saturday. That was all. No question mark. No are you sure or what are you doing or this is probably a bad idea. Just, I'll be there at 7. Saturday. I sat on my couch in my apartment in the sudden, very loud silence of someone who had just done something that couldn't be undone, and I thought, okay then. I thought, I have absolutely no idea who I am right now. The week between that Sunday and the following Saturday was the strangest week of my professional life. I was perfectly functional. I scheduled meetings, fielded calls, managed the calendar, anticipated problems before they arrived, all the things I was supposed to do. I did all of them correctly. And underneath all of that, running like a second track, was this. She's coming Saturday. You sent your address to your CEO. Your CEO responded. She's coming Saturday. The thing I kept returning to, the thing that made my breath catch whenever I let myself think about it directly, was not that I'd sent the message. It was that she'd answered the way she had. No hesitation that I could see. No ambiguity. I'll be there at 7. Saturday. Mary Callahan, who was never caught off guard. Mary Callahan, who always maintained exactly the distance she intended to maintain. Mary Callahan, who had built a career, a life, on knowing exactly what she was doing at every moment. She had responded in under a minute. What did that mean? I spent a lot of time that week not letting myself answer that question. Thursday, Friday. I went to work. I did my job. We were professional with each other, more professional than usual maybe, with a kind of careful distance that I think we were both constructing deliberately. She didn't mention Saturday. I didn't mention Saturday, but I was aware of her in a way that had become almost unbearable. The sound of her voice through her office door. The particular way her heels sounded on the hallway tile. The moment every afternoon when she passed my desk on the way to the elevator and said something brief and ordinary. See you tomorrow. Good work today. Hold my calls until 4. And the way those brief and ordinary words sat in my chest for longer than they had any right to. I told myself I was nervous because it was unusual. I told myself this was just anxiety, just anticipation, just the specific discomfort of having done something uncharacteristic. I did not tell myself that I was falling in love with her. That word was not in the vocabulary I was using that week. Not yet. Saturday came with October light through the windows. The low, golden kind that makes everything look like a memory even while it's happening. I had cleaned the apartment. Obviously. 3 times. I had changed my mind about what to wear 4 times, and then gone back to the first thing. I had made a playlist, and then turned it off because a playlist felt too deliberate. Too much like I was staging something. And what I wanted, what I was desperately hoping for, was for this to feel like whatever it was actually going to be. Not like a performance of it. At 6:58, someone knocked. I opened the door. Mary was standing in the hallway in dark jeans and a soft cream-colored top that I had never seen before, which meant she had dressed for this, which meant... I didn't let myself finish that thought. She had a bottle of wine in one hand, She looked different outside the office. Not less herself. More. "Hi," she said. "Hi," I said. She looked at me for a beat. Then, "Are you going to let me in?" I stepped back. She came in. She looked around my apartment the way she looked at things she was trying to understand. Not casually, but with actual attention, like she was reading it. The books stacked sideways on the shelves because I run out of vertical space. The print of a lake in winter that I bought at a market and have carried through 4 moves. The kitchen that always smells like coffee because I make too much of it. "This is you," she said. It wasn't a question. "Mostly," I said. "I like it." We opened the wine. I had cooked, or tried to, which is to say I had attempted pasta, and it had mostly worked. We sat at the small table by the window, and the city hummed below us, and we ate and talked, and it was easy. That was the surprising thing. After a week of controlled, professional distance, after all that careful construction, it was easy. She talked about the investor meeting, about what it had felt like to build something from nothing, about the years before the company was anything when she was sleeping 5 hours a night and believing in something no one else could quite see yet. She talked about the failures. She talked about them the way she talked about most things, honestly, without drama, without asking for anything except to be heard. I talked about why I'd left my last job, about the moment I'd realized I was very good at something I didn't actually want, about moving to a new city at 32 and the specific kind of terrifying freedom in starting over when you're old enough to know what you're doing and young enough to still care. She listened. Mary Callahan, CEO, the person that everyone in the office approached with prepared talking points and practiced first sentences. She listened to me the way very few people had ever listened to me. Completely. Without waiting for her turn to speak. We finished the pasta. We finished the wine. The city got darker outside the window, and we didn't turn on more lights. Just sat in the low amber glow of the lamp in the corner. And somewhere in the middle of it, the conversation slowed into something quieter, more careful. The way a conversation slows when both people are aware that they're getting close to something real. "Can I ask you something?" she said. "Yes." "Why did you send it?" I had been waiting for this. I had been dreading this. I had rehearsed 17 different answers to this exact question, ranging from deflective to honest to somewhere in the middle. I picked none of them. "Because I've been trying not to for months," I said. And I ran out of reasons not to. The silence that followed was the longest silence I had ever sat inside. She was looking at me across the table. The lamp was behind her. I couldn't read her face as well as I needed to. Then she said, "I've been trying not to, too." Those 6 words hit me somewhere I wasn't ready for. I kept my voice steady. Trying not to what? She didn't look away. "You know what, Fabi?" I did know. I knew exactly what. And that was the moment. That was the moment I had been building toward for months without letting myself admit it. When I understood that what I felt was not going to be manageable by professional distance, or internal rules, or carefully maintained composure. What I felt was large, and certain, and already done. But understanding something, and knowing what to do with it, are 2 entirely different things. I looked down at the table. "This complicates things," I said. "Yes," she said. "It does. I work for you. I know. That's not a small thing." "No," she said. "It's not." Another silence, longer this time. Outside, a siren passed and faded. "What do we do?" I asked. And she, Mary Callahan, who always knew what to do, who had built a career on knowing what to do, said, "I don't know." It was the most human thing I had ever heard her say. I looked up. She was still looking at me, and in her face I saw something I hadn't expected. Not confidence. Not the controlled certainty she wore like a second skin at the office. something underneath that. Something quieter and older and a little bit afraid. She was afraid. That surprised me more than anything. But before I could decide what to do with that, before I could say anything else, she glanced at her watch and said carefully, "I should probably go." "Okay," I said. She stood. I stood. We walked to the door. She stopped in the doorway and looked at me one more time, and there was something in that look that said everything she hadn't said. "Good night, Fabi," she said. "Good night." She left. I closed the door. I stood with my back against it for a long moment in the quiet apartment and tried to understand what had just happened. What had just happened was this. We had told each other the truth. Not all of it, not by a long stretch, but the first layer of it. The kind of truth that, once said, rearranges everything. I had thought, before tonight, that the telling would make it simpler. I understood now that it made it harder. Because now I knew she felt it too. And now I had to decide what to do with that. And the decision wasn't just about me and what I wanted. It was about the job, the power dynamics, the complicated geometry of working for someone you were falling in love with, the risk to both of us if this went wrong. I thought about all of that. And underneath all of that, quietly insistent, was this. She was afraid. Mary Callahan, who was never afraid, was afraid. And somehow that was the thing I couldn't stop returning to. Not what she'd said, not the question of what came next. The fact that she'd let me see her afraid, that she'd sat across from me in the lamplight and said I don't know, and meant it. Something about that changed the shape of everything. I just didn't understand how. Yet. But before we continue, if you've made it this far, it's because you recognize something in this. That specific feeling of sitting across from someone and saying the true thing out loud for the first time, and watching the world rearrange itself around the words. Click the like button right now. It lets me keep bringing you stories like this one. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe now and hit the bell. That way YouTube tells you when the next one drops. Now, I want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever said something to someone that couldn't be unsaid, and then had to live in the silence after? What did you do while you waited? Type it for me. I read every single one. And tell me, what city are you watching from? I'll heart everyone. Now, back to Fabi and Mary. The following week at the office was a masterclass in pretending. We were good at it. That was the thing I hadn't expected. How seamlessly we both slipped back into the professional structure, the clean and legible distance, the careful choreography of boss and assistant. From the outside, nothing had changed. Meetings ran on schedule. Emails were answered. Decisions were made. But I was different inside it. Everything she did landed differently. A sentence. A glance across a conference table. The specific way she handed a document back to me. Always careful not to let our fingers meet, I noticed, which meant she was being careful, which meant she was thinking about it too. That thought would sit in my chest for the rest of the day. Wednesday, she called me into her office for a budget review. An ordinary thing. We'd done it 20 times. But she closed the door, which she didn't always do, and we sat on opposite sides of her desk and went through the numbers. And I was so aware of the 4 feet of space between us that I could barely concentrate on the spreadsheet. She caught me not concentrating. She looked up. Fabi. Sorry. I'm here. A pause. Then she said quietly, so that only I could hear. Me too. That was all. Just that. Me too. She looked back at the spreadsheet. I looked back at mine. We finished the review. I went back to my desk. I sat there for a while pretending to respond to emails. This was, I understood, sitting there, not sustainable. Not as a long-term strategy. The professional distance worked on the surface, but it was costing something. I could feel the cost in the way every interaction had become slightly too charged, slightly too careful, the way ordinary professional moments had this undercurrent that we were both pretending wasn't there. I had options. I understood them clearly. Option 1, let it go. Go back to before the text message, before the Saturday dinner, before the I've been trying not to too. Treat it as a moment of honesty that didn't need to become anything more. Keep the job. Keep the professional relationship. Be sensible. Option 2, do something about it, which meant navigating the most complicated set of logistics I had ever faced. The power imbalance, the professional risk, the question of what doing something about it even looked like in a situation like this. I thought about option 1. I thought about it seriously, respectfully, with genuine effort. And what I found, when I thought about it honestly, was this. I had already let go of too many things in my life to preserve comfort. The job I'd left, the city I'd come from, the version of myself who always chose the safe thing, because the safe thing was what people like me chose. I had come here to start over. I had come here to be different. And different had never quite looked like Mary Callahan before. But I was beginning to understand that this, whatever this was part of what different meant. Thursday. I was packing up at the end of the day when she appeared at my desk. This didn't happen often. She usually texted or called through the intercom. She stood in front of me with her coat already on and her bag over her shoulder, ready to leave, and she said, "I've been thinking." "Okay," I said. "About the complications you mentioned." I mentioned a few. A small involuntary smile. "You did." She looked at me for a moment. I spoke with legal on a hypothetical basis. I went very still. About conflict of interest provisions, disclosure protocols. She kept her voice even and low. About what the company policy actually requires versus what people assume it requires. My heart was doing something complicated. "And?" I said. "And," she said, "it turns out the complications are real, but they're manageable. If both parties want to manage them." Both parties. That sounds very corporate, I said. That got the real laugh, the surprised one, the one that came from her chest and made her look 27 years old for a second. "I know," she said. "I've been in too many legal meetings this week." She looked at me. I looked at her. "Fabi," she said, "I want to have a conversation that has nothing to do with the office. Not here. Not during work hours." A pause. "If you want that too." I thought about option 1. I set it down. "Saturday?" I said. Something moved across her face. Relief, maybe. Or maybe it was something it would take me a while to learn to read correctly. "Saturday," she said. She left. I sat back in my chair and breathed for the first time all week. Here is what I understood in that moment. And this is the part I didn't expect, the part that surprised me most about myself. I was not afraid. I had expected to be afraid. I had been afraid, in theory, for months. Afraid of complicating things. Afraid of professional disaster. Afraid of wanting something that might cost me everything I had carefully built. But sitting there in the quiet office after she left, the only thing I felt was certain. Not certain it would work. Not certain it would be easy. Not certain of any of the outcomes. Certain only that this was true. That it was mine. That I was not going to set it down, because setting it down was easier. I had done easier before. Easier had never felt like this. 2 Saturdays later, I learned something about Mary Callahan that changed the shape of every story I had told myself about her. We'd been spending time together, carefully, quietly, with the slow and specific attention of 2 people who understand that what they're building matters enough to build it right. We'd walked through a farmer's market uptown and had coffee at a place she knew from before the company was anything. We'd had dinner again, at a restaurant this time, at a corner table far from where anyone from work would go. Each time, she was exactly what I'd seen across the desk for 8 months. Precise, perceptive, unhurried, in control. But that Saturday was different. We were at my apartment again. She'd arrived with groceries and cooked, which surprised me, watching Mary Callahan navigate my small kitchen with a confidence that was slightly different from her boardroom confidence, more physical, more present. And we'd eaten and cleaned up, and then we were sitting on the couch in that good quiet that had been building between us, and I asked, without planning to, "Who's in the photo? On your desk?" She didn't answer immediately. I almost took it back. Too far, too early, wrong moment. But then she said, "My sister." And the way she said it, the very specific way the past tense was embedded in the 2 words without either word being in the past tense, told me what I was about to hear. "She died," Mary said. 5 years ago. She was 34. The room was very quiet. "I'm sorry," I said. "She would have liked you," Mary said. "She had very good instincts about people." A pause. She was the one who told me I was running from things instead of building them. I thought she meant the company. A long beat. I think she meant other things too. I didn't say anything. I just listened. And something happened while I listened that I hadn't been prepared for. Mary Callahan, the Mary Callahan who was always ready, always calibrated, always one breath ahead of every room she entered, started talking, not in the controlled, measured way she talked in board meetings or even in dinner conversation, but in the way someone talks when the wall finally gets too heavy to hold up, about the 5 years since, about building the company into something her sister would have been proud of, and the hollow feeling that came with every milestone because there was no one to call, about the pattern she'd developed of staying a specific, strategic distance from everyone, close enough to be effective, not close enough to get hurt again, about how good she had gotten at it, about how 8 months ago something had started going wrong with that strategy. "Wrong?" I said. "Someone kept making tea at exactly the right moment," she said, quietly, "and noticing things I hadn't told anyone, and being—" She stopped, started again. "Being genuinely there. Not performing being there, actually there." She was looking at her hands. "I tried very hard not to notice," she said. "I know," I said. "I did too." She looked at me then, and I saw something I hadn't expected to see in the face of the woman who had never once, in 8 months, let me see her unguarded. She looked uncertain, not afraid exactly, something more specific than afraid. The look of someone who has protected herself expertly for a long time and is standing at the edge of something she can't protect herself from and knows it. I realized, in that moment, something that rearranged everything I thought I understood about us. I had spent months believing that I was the vulnerable one. The assistant, the newcomer, the one who had something to lose. I had believed that Mary was the one who held all the cards, the power, the history, the certainty. I had believed, at some fundamental level, that she was the one who could decide how this went. I had the whole thing backwards. She had been protecting herself the way someone protects themselves when they've already lost something that mattered. Carefully. Completely. With the full force of an exceptional intelligence applied to the problem of not getting hurt again. And I, Fabi, who had walked into her office 8 months ago with nothing to her name in this city except a start over and a willingness to try. I had just casually walked through every defense she'd spent 5 years building. Not because I was trying to, because I was just there. The certainty I'd felt on Thursday at my desk came back, but it felt different now. Bigger. It had room in it for her too, not just for what I wanted, but for what it meant that she was sitting here letting me see this. I said, "Mary?" She looked at me. "I'm not going anywhere," I said. Simple. Not dramatic. Just true. She held my gaze for a moment that felt like it lasted longer than any moment I could remember. Then she exhaled. Slow. Full. The particular kind of exhale that comes from setting something down that's been very heavy for a very long time. "Okay," she said. Just that. Okay. But the way she said it was the realest thing I had heard in years. I reached out and took her hand. Just that. Just her hand in mine. And we sat there in the apartment with the city outside, and the lamp in the corner, and the extraordinary fact of two people who had both been running from something finally stopping in the same place at the same time. She was the one everyone thought was safe. She was the one who had been holding herself together with wire and discipline, and a strategy that couldn't survive the simple, relentless fact of being actually seen. And I, the one who had seemed like the uncertain one, the one starting over, the one without leverage. I was the one who wasn't afraid. I was the one who had stopped first. I was the one who reached out. Neither of us had expected the story to go this way. I had expected to be rescued, in some version of it. To be the one who needed steadying. That's usually how the story goes. The person with the power does the choosing, and the rest of us wait to see if we're chosen. But love doesn't read job descriptions. And strength is not always what it looks like from the outside. Sometimes the person holding everything together is the one who most needs someone to stay. And sometimes the one who stayed was just waiting for someone to stop being so careful with them. If this story stayed with you, if you've ever been the one who seemed fine and wasn't, or the one who stayed even when it was uncertain, write discovery in the comments. That's how I know you made it all the way here with me. And if you want another story, the kind that gets inside something real, the next one is already on your screen. Take care of yourselves out there. Until next time.